Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is my garden room. I've saved around £12,000 doing this myself. I contacted the council, they worked out the square meterage of the floor or something like this, and they decided that I didn't need planning permission. We will get the electrics signed off because we've done quite a bit to the electrics, so they will be signed off at the end. Apart from that, I was good to go. I've got a letter from the council to show to the buyers of the house when we sell that this is all above board and it's all been signed off and what have you. So yeah, watch the video to the end and you'll see how to create a lovely garden room from your garage. As with many of my projects, I like to do drawings and diagrams so I can see what's going where. This is a diagram of what I'm going to be doing. It's a double garage and I've got the spotlights, wall lights, I can even put the television, bifold door. It's got all the measurements on there as well, so when I'm ordering plasterboard, timber, I can refer to this drawing and work out the square meterage of the area that I'm going to be covering. So it helped with my insulation, plasterboard, flooring, things like that. Yeah, I've got a bit of a sofa plan in there, worktops, stuff like this. Even got the total square meterage on the left, so I can refer back to that quickly as well. So this is like the before shot. This is what we're working with. This is my garage. The first thing I did was I went out and bought some timbers and some screws, masonry screws, so you can see me here drilling into the concrete floor, and then I'll fasten that timber with the concrete masonry screw. I just knock it in with a hammer and then tighten that up. And that holds that securely. There we go. First timber in. So that's just basically the halfway line, that wall. I then went and put one straight up vertical and then just checked everything was square. Checking everything square and plumb as we go. Get yourself some good spirit levels. And there's the other timber there across to that other wall. So that would be the bottom of the wall to section off the garage room. And we started building up from the base frame straight up to them roof rafters. Keeping that nice and plumb. So I did both sides, you know, the short edge and then check the longer edge as well. So we'll plumb on both sides and then get that fastened in. And then from there we span across to the original first vertical there. So you've got like a rectangle frame ready to build. So I'm measuring 60 centimeters from the end vertical. And I just want to talk a bit about this. The reason is because plasterboard is 1200 millimeters wide by 2,400 millimeters high. So we put the studs in the right positions so the plasterboard falls on each stud. So as in you can put the plasterboard on one side and without cutting the board, you want it to finish in the middle of that stud so you can get the screws in and then put your other piece of plasterboard on. So it's important you do this just because it'll save you time in the long run and probably save you money because you won't be cutting up as much plasterboard, and it's just how people do it. Also the center bits going up, I do them at approximately 1200. So if there was a chance I had to put the plasterboard the other way around, it'd also fit in that space, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to talk a bit about that before I go any further. Okay, so I've made it to the door opening. So this door is going to open into my little garage, and you can buy a kit from your DIY store, and it's basically 3 lengths of wood that then become your door frame. And it also gives you the stoppers for when you close your door, but I'll show you that when I fit my door later in the video. Again, it's really important that you get things plumb, square, straight, double check. It's one of the most important things of this build, I would say, things being plumb and straight, because it just saves you time in the long run. So if you get your door frame slightly wrong, it's going to be hard to fit that door because doors are square. So it's, well, rectangle. It's important to get this door frame in correct. So make sure the studs are in nice and plumb, nice and straight in the right positions before you put your door frame in. So you can see me there just putting the top on the door frame. The frame basically screws into the studs. You can cut and trim your studs to whatever length is needed to make your door fit comfortably. Obviously wood's quite versatile, so you can fit, as long as your door frame's square and level, you're winning. So there you can see the top of that on there. You've got two different sizes. You can see the notch in the top. You've got two different size doors. I went for the larger door, so if that makes sense, that just goes to whatever size you need. Again, just one last check, make sure it's square, and voila, you have a door opening. Look at that. I mean, this stage was exciting. I got a good feel for the room. Unlike I had on the drawings, it was there in real. So, let's carry on with the build. So I'm working my way around with the STUDWORK timbers, fastening together, fastening to the floor and the roof rafters as we have done previously. If you can see there closely, I've got a bit of a gap between the exterior brick wall and the STUDWORK. That's just so I can have a bit of an airflow going behind that wall and insulation. I'm at the other side now, studding round the garage door. It's an external garage door, so there's enough room there for about 400mm of insulation, which should be adequate amount to keep that from letting cold in. Also, I will say, my garage house is built on a hill, so water never came under this garage door. Although I am putting a heavy amount of silicone sealant around the door, top to bottom and all along the edge. You might want to take further measures just to double check. You're not going to get water coming under the door, but that's what I've done on this occasion. We're in a good place now with this stud work. All the sides done. I'll now take it round and start looking at studding round the bifold door opening. I measured 3 meters because that's the distance I need the opening for my bifold door, and that's where I'm going to build the stud work up to, so you can see there. But what I discovered was the actual brick wall of my garage was not plumb. So I decided to do my stud work plumb, as you can see there, the gap, and then just packed out the stud work. For this part of the section, I discovered that the garage floor in the corners was slightly moist. So what I've done, I've just painted this with bitumen. I think there's soil on the outside of the garage that's higher than the damp course. So I'm going to remove that soil at a later date, but for now, I'm going to paint with bitumen, and there will also be a plastic sheet membrane between the floor and the actual conversion. Final bit of stud on the left-hand side of the bifold. So we took that right up to that door because that door will be coming out. The one that you can see there will be replaced with the new lintel and bifold door. We are now on to the fun part, electrics, which took a lot longer than I thought it would. Now, luckily, my dad is an electrical engineer, and I sent him a drawing of my plans, and he created drawings for me, which showed me where all the cables went, where all the junction boxes went, how the switches would work, and all I had to do was run cables. So I'm going to show you a series of drawings that I got created. So here's the spotlight drawing. And as you go through these, you'll see the extent of the electrics and how confusing it can get. So that's why it's important to get somebody who knows what they're doing, i.e. an electrical engineer, to either do the drawings for you so you can then run your cables, or come and do the work themselves. I was doing this on a budget, so I did the cables myself, but my dad did me these lovely drawings. This is the internal wall lights drawing. I mean, feel free to pause the video and then study these in more detail if you wish. I'm just running through so you know exactly what I've done. Here's the external wall lights image. This is the sockets diagram. And last diagram is my garage lights. You run all your cables through the joists. I drilled holes through the ceiling joists and just ran the cables through them. You can see the amount of cables hanging down for all the different lights and switches. Something to point out, if you do it yourself, the socket wires in the stud wall to the bottom right are in a black conduit. This is to stop them overheating within the insulation, and it is a regulation. These will all be signed off at the end of the build. Just a little tip for you there. Another tip, label up all your wires, because once you've got them in, you need to know what they're for and where they're going, so your electrician can wire them up. So I just put little paper tags and tape. Another way is to write on the actual cable in permanent marker, which is probably a better idea rather than the paper and the tape. But each one of these wires is all linked up. I've also marked on the ceiling number 1, 2, 3, 4 spotlights, so we clearly know which way they're going. And it just makes it a lot more straightforward when you come to installing your switches and appliances. This image, if you look in the top roof rafters, you can see I've put noggins in between each rafter. This is to mimic the plasterboard size, like we explained in the stud walls, so the plasterboard meets on these noggins for when I'm installing it, which is actually the next step, and this is when your room starts to feel like a room. Big delivery of plasterboard and insulation. Quite an exciting moment. I know you might think it's a boring video of a truck delivering stuff, but it meant a lot to me at the time. So I placed some plasterboard in this small garage room and then the rest on the floor flat. It's important to keep it flat on the floor because you need the plasterboard to stay perfectly straight. First piece of plasterboard on. Can you remember me earlier saying about the 60 centimeter measurements? Well, here I am using a piece of plasterboard that's cut to 60 centimeters to work out where I have to put my screws, and it just makes life easier. This is round the back of that piece of plasterboard, and it's the wiring for my consumer unit, which will go on the other side of that wall inside the garage. There it is on the wall with wires coming out, ready to connect for the first electrical test. So I continued boarding around the storage part of the room, around the doorway, and that was that, complete for now. Insulation. We are on insulation, and I always do all my projects to a budget. DIY Dan saves money, so I've used 100mm rock wool insulation, and I've put it between the stud walls using spray adhesive. As you can see, I've sprayed the adhesive onto the wall and the studs, and then I'm just sticking the insulation in there, and that holds it upright and stops it sagging over time. The room's complete. I've had a heater on and the insulation is sufficient. So I worked my way around the room, putting insulation in the walls. Nothing technical going on here, it's just insulation. Now, I bet you're thinking, why hasn't he finished plasterboarding the ceiling? Well, I hit a wall, quite literally. So the wall there, from the door, 3 meters across, is going to get knocked through, so I can put my bifold door in. But I can't plasterboard up to it because I need to put the lintel in. So I got the room to a state where it's as far as it can go, while that hole's not being knocked out, to keep things dry, because as soon as that hole's knocked out, rain can come in. So I left it till the very last moment to take the wall out. So the next job would be to knock this wall through using my strong arm and acro props, and take this wall down and install the lintel. So that is my next job. Once that's complete, I can continue with the stud wall and the plasterboard. So these lines here, the green ones, are equal distance markers for my acro props. So I'm going to drill out the cement and slide them in. So here we go, I'm drilling that cement out. Sorry about the filming, I'm filming one-handed while drilling cement. Basically trying to remove it, and by drilling small holes at different angles, 45 degree left and right, and then drilling out the center cement. Basically making enough room for my strong boys to slide in that gap. So you should end up with a gap like this, to then place this, which is the strong boy. So keep working your way along and insert the strong boys ready for the props. Then all you do is put the props under the strong boys in the gap, and tighten up like this. And you just keep tightening until they're quite firm. And once they're at a stage where they're firm enough, you can just step back and check the levels to make sure that prop is plumb, which is important. Another little tip is to just put some decking or pieces of wood under the props so the weight of the wall doesn't compress your slabs. You don't want any cracks or marks. So you can see 4 acropops here, every 600 millimeters just to be safe. So you tighten them up, use your common sense, tighten them up till they're firm and you cannot move them. Don't tighten them too tight so it lifts the top of your garage off. Just use your common sense with that one. So I'm gradually chipping away at the mortar around the old lintel, so I can remove that. And then I'm going to take the row of bricks out that's under the strong boys. Same method with the masonry bit and the drilling at 45 degrees and then hollowing it out and just chipping away at it carefully all the way along, removing those bricks. You want to do it with a drill and not a hammer so the bricks above do not fall down. If they don't fall down, it means less brickwork for you in the future. So here's the lintel. I've slid it into that gap that I've created in between the bricks. Again, using the drill bit. That slides nicely into there. This lintel's from eBay. The company I used were really good. I gave them the measurements and they worked out the load bearing, and basically they supply these to builders all the time. They said it's fine to use, and it is. Absolutely no problems. And there it is in place. So you can see closely now the gap that I slid my lintel into. A few packers there to try and level it as much as I can. My wall was not level, so not a major problem. I decided to keep the lintel as it is in that brickwork, not level. And I know DIY Dan always goes on about level and spirit levels and being plumb and level, but this is not. The only other option was to chisel away at the brick and make the bricks uneven to make the lintel level, if that makes sense. And I didn't want to do that because I thought it'd be more noticeable from the outside. So I decided to make my bifold door blend into the unlevel lintel once fitted, if that makes sense. Now, all it means is I'll have a 5mm gap at one end and a 10mm gap at the other. I decided I can fill that with some beading that goes around the edge of the bifold door that you will see later on in the video. Another little tip, you see the back of the lintel goes up about 7-8 inch. Well, I bolted that into the bricks just for a bit of extra security. You can see there the bolts I used, basically drilled into the brick, put some plugs in and bolted that securely. So now that my lintel was in place, it was time to fix this permanently. So I started laying bricks within the space I'd created, basically putting the bricks back in. And then I used a tool to correctly measure the distance between each brick before I got the cement out, just so it looks nice and even for aesthetics. You won't need loads of cement for this job, so I just mixed it in a mixing bowl with a trowel. And then started pushing it into the gaps with the pointing tool. I think I got a set between 4 and 12mm. I think I was using the 8mm just to point up and compress that cement in there really good. And make sure you use quite a dry mix. So there's more progress on the pointing up of the bricks back in place. And I left where the strong boys were, I left that for now because they're not going to be removed until I take the whole brick wall down, just because of precautions. I drew a nice plumb line where I was going to be cutting the wall out for my bifold door. I then fastened some wood alongside this line and used the wood as a template for my cutting blade. Now I haven't got a video of me cutting this out because, well, I was on my own doing it, so it's hard to video at the same time. But I can show you, there's the before line and there's the after line. I've basically run my still saw from top to bottom, following that wood and cutting all the way through. And now we're starting to chip away at that brick wall. This is an exciting part, opening that opening into the garden, feeling that space for the first time, gives you a great sense of achievement and makes it worthwhile and reassures you that you're doing the right thing. Here's DIY daughter knocking a few bricks out for me, It's nice to get the family involved where possible, obviously if it's safe. And here's the extent of the demolition. First walk up to the opening into the garden. Great feeling. Lots to do still, lots to tidy. But yeah, good progress. Another momentous occasion, removing the last acropop. Oh yes, the wall didn't fall down and no one's died. Excellent. The grand opening is revealed. Let's open a bottle of wine and drink it. So now we have a lintel and an opening. I can get round to finishing my stud work, which is the timbers around the doorway to fasten my plasterboard onto. So I continued with that, and as well I got my ceiling plasterboard on. Got all that finished. And here's a video just to show, because you don't see this much on my videos, but here's a bit of teamwork from DIY Dan's family. Ignore my belly. Installing a piece of, the last piece of plasterboard, ceiling plasterboard. Very challenging, very heavy. You see my wife to the right squished in. It's not enjoyable, but you know, putting this board up was one of the hardest things, I'd say. I'm sure there's easier ways, and I'm sure the pros will tell me there's easier ways of doing this, but DIY Dan did it this way, and his family helped him for the ceiling anyway, not much more. I'm gonna speed this video up now, so let's just get that whacked on. Alright, so let's complete our plasterboard. I went around doing all the walls. I used 1,000 screws putting this on. So there we go. Most of the walls now covered in plasterboard. I've left the opening edges because I need to plasterboard up to the bifold door frame. So now I need the bifold door in. So it's all done in different stages. You just got to be aware of which stage goes where. So bifold delivery time. Voila, there it is. Glass separate. You put that in after you've put the door in. Right, I'm now going to guide you through fitting my bifold door. It's not difficult. If you do everything precisely and get it plumb and level, it should work perfectly fine. Mine does, and this is how I did it. So there's the door put in place. I've literally just lifted that up with my partner and dropped that in the hole. And then I put a spirit level on just to see where I am, just as a kind of starting point. And it wasn't that bad. Okay, so I've got some plastic membrane. That's to go underneath the door, and that acts as a barrier. So if any water dribbles through the threshold, and I've gone through a low threshold door, if the water dribbles through there, it hits the plastic and runs down into the soil below, into the ground below. And there's some packers, 400mm in between, ready to insert. So the next step I did, I opened the doors and put them on a wooden block. I then got my large spirit level to check the levels while putting the red packers underneath. So the red packers are all one size. They're in there, and it was slightly off level. As well, I've leveled the doors while they're opening onto the wooden block using packers. So you can see there I've placed packers and wooden blocks under the open doors and making sure they are level as well. Everything needs to be perfectly level. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so I've added 2 blue packers in replace of the red ones. That's to raise the door up there by probably 3 or 4 mil, just to make this door perfectly level. If you'd have noticed on my original picture when I placed the door in the hole, I jammed it with some wooden blocks. These are screwed into the bricks. So the white bits that go down, they're called jams. So I wanted to get them plumb before I even started. So I've packed them up with packers to make sure they're perfectly level and plumb. So here's another top tip. A piece of string from one corner all the way to the other corner, and then from the bottom corner all the way to the top corner. Make sure it's taut. So the 2 pieces of string meet in the middle, and if you can see, what we're trying to do is get these pieces of string just touching. So very accurate. you'll see as I press the string away, not that way, the string is just touching in the middle. That means our door is not skewed in any way. So top tip for you there, quite an important piece. I'd always do this when fitting a bifold door. Again, my door works perfectly. So everything you see here, do it. Okay, to fix the frame, I use concrete screws, 5mm concrete screws with a 4mm masonry bit. Good quality screws and good quality masonry bit. I then marked up a marker, as you can see here, so I didn't drill too deep. I also did a test. Just to keep things precise, I tested the masonry drill bit and the concrete screw into one of the bricks from the wall to make sure it didn't crack the brick and also to make sure it held securely. Luckily, the test went well and I continued with the fixings. So the first step was to get a metal drill bit and drill out the hole, 5mm hole, out of the base of the threshold. The next step was to countersink a hole so the tip of the screw sat flush, if not slightly below, the threshold, because the door slides over this and we need it to clear it easily. The final stage is to screw the screw into the frame, into the brick with the pre-drilled hole in between the packers. And if you remember, we've put packers every 400mm, so therefore we've got a fixing every 400mm, and that's all around the frame. Okay, so fixing the jambs, again, double check that everything is straight, plumb and not skewed every time you put a fixing in. And we're going to put the fixings into the jambs, again, pre-drill into the brick, and then that goes straight through there's a hole cut out of the metal there for us to put our fixing in. Working further up the jambs, there's more space for us just to slip the fixing straight into the wall. Again, every 400cm, working up to the top of the frame now. In this image, you can see the top of the frame and the metal lintel. These are packers, U-shaped packers, and they've packed it level, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to be screwing through the center of these U-shaped packers into the lintel. We're going to drill that lintel with the same metal drilling drill we had used on the threshold. So here's my metal drilling bit drilling through my steel lintel. Now the key to this is pressure, constant pressure and slow drive speed, and it will chip away at that lintel. It's tedious, and the amount of holes you need for a 3-meter door, yeah, it will take a while, but once you've done that, again, masonry drill bit straight through the brick and enter the concrete screws with the packers in between. Again, just checking everything's square. I keep checking. You cannot check too much. My door is in. It's all fixed all the way around. Plumb, level, not skewed. Perfect. Now it's time to fit the glass. So we take the aluminium beading out of each door, as each door has no glass yet. We're going to have to toe and heel the doors, okay? And you have to do this windows and doors. Toe and heel. So we put packers under the glass at the bottom, and we put packers on top of the glass at the top using a glazing tool. And I'm sorry, I haven't taken any pictures of this because I had my hands full doing this, so I struggled taking photos, but I'm going to show you a diagram of how you top and heel with your packers. So get a glazing tool, get some packers, and you lift the glass up, put the packers underneath in the following corners. So if you look at this diagram, this shows packers at the bottom right, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and top left. And that's where you want to be toe and heeling your glass, and this strengthens the door, and it's very, very, very important to do this. Otherwise your door will not close and open properly. Every door is different, but mine has aluminium beading. When I've toe and heeled my glass, I then slide the beading back in and it just pops into place. As you can see it there, it's kind of got grooves. You kind of start at one end, get that in, and then push it all the way down to the bottom. Glass fitted, top and heeled, and this is the very first time we open this door, and my wife's helping me out with the video. So, I mean, exciting and scary, but as you can see, and it's the first time she's opened a bifold, it's sliding effortlessly. It was fitted so well, it just slides and glides. So that's what you want to be seeing after you've fitted your doors. Okay, so I have speeded this video up. I fitted my doors and now I'm going round with frame expander foam and filling all the gaps. And this is water resistant, waterproofing, soundproofing, and proofing from pretty much everything. So get that in there and that seals every nook and cranny. You can trim it off with a Stanley blade afterwards to make it neat and tidy for sealing. What a difference some expander foam around the edges makes. After this was completed, the room just felt completely different. The thermal values and the sound insulation was amazing. It was so quiet in there. So there it is sealed. I will point out, I put frog tape on my frame just so that protects the frame from getting expander foam on it. We didn't want that. And then you can peel the tape off afterwards when you've trimmed down the expander foam. Another job on the bifold is the last job, and it's pushing the rubber trim around the glass. So you basically get this rubber trim and you push it around the glass, in between the glass and the frame. And that secures it and tightens the glass up completely and makes it weatherproof. Can you remember saying my lintel was not level back earlier in the video? Well, here's the plastic trim right at the top. So I've stuck this on with some silicone as I've sealed the door, and it's covered up that imperfection perfectly, and it's very less noticeable than it would have been if I'd have started leveling out the lintel and chopping out my bricks, and the bricks would have been different sizes, which would have been a pain. So I just think this is the easiest way, and you can't tell from looking at it that it's not a level lintel at all, and it doesn't affect the door whatsoever because I've used the packers at different levels. So just to let you know, that's what that is there. So now I got my door in, I could finish off my plasterboarding, and that's basically just boarding up to the door there, all round, ready for the plasterer. So I've got my plasterer booked in, and it's a race against time to get the back boxes cut out for the sockets. So I put the socket back box on there with a spirit level, drew around it, and then used this handy little saw to cut out the space for the back box. And basically I'm going to put that in there and do an electrical test of the sockets and the lights, just because I want peace of mind that all them switches, lights and sockets will be working before my plasterer comes. So there's the sockets installed, and they're all brushed nickel sockets throughout. The next thing I wanted to do is install a loft hatch, an insulated loft hatch. So I just marked it out on the ceiling, cut out my plasterboard. There we go, nice square, because I've got a lot of space up there, so I want to be using it for storage and be putting stuff in the rafters, maybe some loft ladders coming down. And there's the hatch there, installed and ready. This next stage is the flooring. So normally floors of UK garages are sloped because if water comes up, it needs to flow away. So we've got a sloped floor, but I want it level, and I want it level with that threshold. So what I've done, I've laid some plastic sheet in just to protect from damp, and I'm going to lay some wooden joists. So what I've done, I've bought some wooden joists and some mini joist hangers, and I've put timbers each side of this room level with the threshold of the door, and then running the joists across from side to side and insulating it in between, as well as packing underneath the joists to keep them steady. There in this image you can see the timbers running alongside the threshold. Now I've left an 18, 19, 20, 21 mil gap from the top of the timbers to the top of the threshold because I'm going to use 18mm chipboard flooring and 3mm flooring laminate boards. So then that will come flush with the door threshold and give you that nice opening that you want when you open your doors into your garden. So here's the chipboard I talked about, 18mm water resistant chipboard with a plastic removable coating. So this is great for when you're getting plastered rooms, getting your rooms plastered. So it's such a messy job plastering that when the plaster is finished, you can remove the plastic and chuck it in the bin and be left with a dust-free surface for when you stick down your flooring. As I'm laying the flooring, I'm gluing each joint with wood glue. As well as that, I'm putting wood glue on the joists. So when I lay the flooring down, it's also stuck down secure. So that's all the flooring down, board on, ready for plastering. I've also done an electrical test. I know you're thinking, why has he put the light fittings on when it's getting plastered? I wanted to do an electrical test because I ran all that wiring through. And my electrical engineer came and connected the switches and the junction boxes and the consumer units, but I wanted to make sure it worked before we put the plaster on in case we needed to alter any wires. So that's just me being precautious. Luckily, they all worked fine, and we're going to crack on with the plastering now. Plastering. Exciting step. It almost looks like a finished room. This is Dion. I will leave his contact details here on this screen. I told him I would mention him, and I told him I'd share the details. I can say his plastering is unbelievably perfect. No imperfections whatsoever. It is like glass. And DIY Dan says so, and if I say so, it's perfect. I've had many plasterers in the past, some good, some not so good. This guy is spot on. So if you are looking for a good plasterer for a glass finish, contact Dion on the details shown. Time to decorate. So this is DIY Boy, and he is helping me out with some whitewashing, which is basically 50% water, 50% white emulsion. It's then painted onto the plaster, and the water drags the paint into the plaster rather than the paint sitting on top of the plaster and peeling, which is that's what would happen if you did just plain emulsion. So the whitewash basically gives it a nice key for your first coat of white emulsion, or whichever paint colour you choose. And there it is, all fully decorated, flooring down, furnishing in. Saved a hell of a lot of money and added value to my property. Please subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.